Welcome back. Alright, enough stalling. I have power, I have raw resources in quantities beyond human comprehension, and I have automation, so let's get to progressing. Step 1 is getting some huge fluid storage upgrades. And I mean some seriously honkin' storage cells here. My system is going to be packing some Dobon Hongaroos. Until recently, I have been using a careful mix of dedicated cells whitelisted to certain fluids to ensure that my system is always able to process everything that it needs. Without this, cells would just fill up too quickly and the system would jam and processing recipes would no longer work. Using some real big badonkers, micromanagement can now be entirely thrown out the window, because I can now make Dobon Honker-sized storage cells. Too much nitrogen? I don't care! The Dobon Honkaloo cells can handle it. Even if I somehow manage to accumulate 1.2 trillion millibuckets of a fluid, that just means I need to install more of the Tohonger Cougars. And if that doesn't work, even bigger Bonhungagahoogs. And if that doesn't work, banks of humongous Hungalunga Nonolagungas. Now I just need something to fill them with. Enter my next upgrade project. Every large chemical reactor gets an IV tier energy hatch. Normally, upgrading multi-block energy hatches when their current production speed is already adequate is a waste of time, since during processing the hatch would either go unused, or would consume twice as much power for no particular reason. Large chemical reactors are an exception to this rule, in that their multi-block bonus includes a trait where they will perfectly overclock any recipe passed through them. As mentioned before, raw resources are no longer a major concern, and since the energy cost is the same, this just results in a straight benefit to reduced processing time, with none of the downsides. It also unlocks IV tier LCR recipes on my main production line, which is, kind of nice to have. What it will do is increase my power demands for a bit while the system processes backlogged recipes, but that isn't something I'm particularly concerned about. The salvage parts from that system can then be immediately repurposed into getting the last part of my ore refinement systems online, namely a thermal centrifuge. This isn't super commonly used, but it has a few useful recipes that give outputs unique to its processing line, notably one that allows me to extract gallium from bauxite ore. Up until this point, all of my gallium has come from Thaumcraft crucible crafting, which, while more than effective up until now, is nowhere near scalable enough for me to rely on going forward. There are probably other ways that I can use this, but gallium production is the only one that I care about at the moment. Next in the lineup is tearing out the nuclear cable spaghetti that my electrolyzer setup uses and redesigning it in a way that can be scaled appropriately. I'm not entirely certain what was going through my head when I made the original setup, but I can assure you it had absolutely nothing to do with convenience or scalability, and probably placed an emphasis on being as cheap as humanly possible while simultaneously being utterly incomprehensible to anyone in the future. There is enough free space in the building to accept a design similar to what I had going with my LCRs, and since I don't anticipate needing more than 4 electrolyzers for a goodly long while, I decide to leave the setup in its current location. As with before, there is a mix of passive always craft if you can recipes and active only craft when you're requested recipes in these electrolyzers, though there is an exception that I made to make sure that I always have at least 10,000 calcium chloride on hand. I can craft it if I need it, but it's a byproduct of other processes and has valid industrial uses, so I decided that there'd be no sense recycling it only to immediately craft it back up again. This requirement necessitates some extra jank below the electrolyzers, but other than that, the system is pretty typical. Since I need a dedicated LCR running on frequency 9 solely to process salt water from gas tiers, I go ahead and install a couple more, and in doing so notice that the entire right bank of my chemical reactors is off-center by a block. Lovely. Now I have to fix that, or it's going to bug me forever. Fortunately for me, there are only 2 in this bank right now, so I guess it could have been a whole lot worse. Getting that in then seals the deal in terms of material shortages for the next little bit. Hopefully. Until I run out of banked gases to extract hydrogen from, I guess, but it's a work in progress. For what is, hopefully, the last major renovation project for a bit, I need to get my old charcoal processing setup back up and working. With IV chemical reactor lines available and Louvre tier tech just around the corner, I need to start producing polybenzimidazole. This process requires 1,2-dimethylbenzene and regular benzene as crafting ingredients at some point or another, and I may or may not have been blasting through my supplies of those for the past few episodes to feed my non-stop hydrogen demand, while getting other systems online, and have been utterly neglecting to plan for when I was going to run out of them. Oops. The new farm follows the same basic principles as the old one, but with a few changes as a result of me learning new things and having better technology to work with. First, the spike is uber enchanted. Educational scales with higher levels in exactly the way you would expect, and now that I know more about how the design functions with high mob throughput and can deal more damage more quickly with the spike, I feel comfortable reducing the overall size of the loot chute significantly. It still isn't small by any stretch of the imagination, but it is at least manageable enough to fit into a building, rather than requiring me to mount it on the bottom of my base, which is what I was considering doing earlier. Second, the XP and item collection system has been completely reworked using what I learned from the gas blaster design downstairs and some tips from the viewers. Instead of relying on vacuum hoppers, I can use an XP grate to collect any orbs that pass over it. I forgot who told me that trick, sorry about that. This has the advantage of functionally unlimited throughput, which the vacuum hoppers demonstrably did not possess. Instead of sticking the XP in the tank, I opt to use an Ender.io Experience Obelisk, which is basically just a cheap tank with infinite storage for only XP juice, and an interface for easy human interaction. Item logistics is handled by a single vacuum chest with a few filters to recycle rotten flesh, trash, and feed useful drops into my network through the same route the gas blaster downstairs uses. The only thing that isn't substantially changed is the auto-crafting system. I played around a bit with using applied energistics fluid crafting to see if I could keep it all in network, but the fluid autofiller kept glitching out and sending concerning messages about failed API calls in the chat every time I tested it in my creative world, and auto-crafting with XP buckets the normal way would have been slower than just keeping the old Project Red system, so I stuck with what I already had. The good news is that I already had a passive distillation setup for my plat line that I can loop charcoal byproducts into, and I suspect, but can't confirm, that it should be able to keep up natively with my charcoal production. I might have to turn off charcoal production at some point, given that it is currently set to run forever, but that's a separate problem. The bad news is the only multi-block fluid extractor option in the game is one of those heinously expensive 9-in-1 processing factories, the assemblage of which being something I had hoped to put off for a while. I would have needed them eventually, but I didn't quite plan on it being so soon, so I bite the bullet and make two, giving me access to all 9 of the machines in their arsenal simultaneously. If nothing else, this will let me take a serious chunk out of the single-block machine processing setup and speed up auto-crafting in general, which are both decent silver linings in their own right. Once I've secured a source of the various benzenes, getting polybenzimidazole, whatever the heck it's called, out of that is fairly trivial. If it weren't for my need to go out and make a single interface upgrade on my frequency 1 chemical reactor, I would have literally not needed to leave the control room once, because I have full remote programming access to the automated crafting recipes of every machine in my factory. This menagerie, at this point, includes one of nearly everything that isn't some sort of super specialized exotic multiblock, and heaping stacks of duplicates when multi-frequency crafting isn't an option. It's a distinctly powerful feeling, being able to simply click buttons and have a fully fleshed out automation line assemble itself, which I guess is kind of what the whole game has been, but this is different because I'm doing second order automation instead of first order. Just trust me on this. My system is flexible enough that I can push buttons and it will reconfigure itself, and that's pretty awesome. A little while later, I am pleased to announce that the prize for first multi-block that needs to be moved to the proper multi-block fab room goes to the mixer. Until recently, I had been using this one multi as kind of a weird combination of both build and fully automatic processing, since I use it for both the plat line and for crafting regular stuff. But the resulting weirdness eventually started requiring more cable space than I was able to support in its little attic hidey hole. The real solution to this problem is to just do the same thing I do with everything else and separate the machines into active and passive processing, but the mixer has so few recipe conflicts that I instead chose to deploy this weird little jank ball of quadruple titanium pipes, pipe shutters to prevent backflow into the interfaces, and conveyor-belted input hatches to try and string it along for a little bit. One good thing does come out of this, and it's that I realized if I wanted to keep using single interfaces on multis without relying on subnetting, I should just be using a conveyor belt to pull items and a fluid pipe to transport liquids, as opposed to what I was doing before with item pipes. I won't bore you with the reasons, just trust me, it will be faster. Unfortunately for me, all of this faffing around doesn't solve the problem I was running into in the first place, which is that there are two recipes for IC2 coolant. Both recipes use lapis dust. The first uses distilled water and returns a full bucket of coolant, and the second one uses regular water and only returns 1/8 of a bucket. Obviously, I want to use distilled water to get the best return on my lapis, but the problem is they both share the same circuit frequency. Normally, this would be fine, since there wouldn't be any regular water to conflict with the recipe, but since I'm also using the mixer for passive processing, I have to pump in regular water anyway, resulting in the machine not knowing which fluid to craft with and choosing the wrong one every single time. Welcome to recipe conflict hell. This is the place people who are cheap and don't want to spend resources making duplicate multi-blocks go. In other related news, recipe conflict hell sucks, and I have a second mixer now. Isn't it funny how these things seem to work themselves out? By now, I have firmly run out of things to stall on, and I basically have two options for progression. I can either start working on a monazite processing line, and yes, someone mentioned I could avoid this by using meteors, but I'm stupid and don't remember how to do that, and lazy and don't feel like trying to look it up. Or I can start working on preparing my Louvre-tier circuitry patches. Circuitry should, in theory, be a simple matter of amassing all the materials, programming the recipes, and then pressing go, and then AFKing for 6 hours, so I opted instead to get off my butt and start messing around with monazite, with the end goal of automating the 33-step processing line to extract samarium, cerium, hafnium, zirconium, and who really cares what else from this stuff. Yeah, 33 steps. Not counting some extra make work for byproduct handling that the quest book doesn't mention. This is not an exaggeration. It also requires more useless machines. The first one is a digester. It has exactly one recipe that I care about. Joy. Step 2 of monazite processing also requires another new multi-block. An entirely new multi-block. This multi-block has a whopping 7 recipes in total. New Horizons is not even trying to pretend that they aren't needlessly bulking up their processing lines anymore. This entire machine was clearly added because some cowboy in a rooster measuring contest wanted to see who could make their processing line longer. Want to know how I know? The machine has 7 recipes, and every single one of them could have been logically placed in a mixing machine instead, since we know that mixers can do dilution just fine because that's how you deliberately make diluted sulfuric acid. I cannot believe I am making an argument that factory processing recipes in a video game don't make sense according to that game's canon, but here we go. Also, the game doesn't let you use mana glass for it, despite mana glass being an EV glass. And in addition to being utterly useless for everything else, the dissolution tank introduces a fun new requirement that all of the ingredient inputs have to be put in a specific ratio, otherwise the recipe will fail. This is a deeply annoying mechanic. Well, okay, I should rephrase. This mechanic itself invites interesting engineering problems, which is great, and in general I think doing this sort of thing is pretty cool, but the fact that it exists in the way that it does annoys me. You see, the real issue it presents is not in automating the machine. It's in, I now have to figure out how to gracefully queue automation requests because my don't ask just send it style of hands-off automation that works for like every other automated recipe in the pack won't cut it here because it's going to mess up the ratios. So, Money Monazite Rare Earth processes into 4 things. I have a recipe here for one of the outputs, specifically the diluted rare earth mud, and I haven't bothered to program in the rest. The problem is, how do you tell the system to start auto-crafting once you have enough muddy monazite? Surely you need a super complicated level balancing system to ensure that you don't incorrectly mix the ratios that detects when you have it. No, you don't. Literally, just program a request in a level maintainer to maintain some non-zero quantity of the diluted mud that you just made a recipe for. The request will fail when you don't have enough stuff to craft the mud, so it won't take up crafting computer space. And it's never going to mix the wrong amounts, because the crafting computers will wait until they know it will succeed, at which point they'll pick up the bill and run it. This super cool mechanic that was supposed to demand a novel problem-solving skill basically just ends up being the same solution as 20 other things that I like to natively maintain stockpiles of out of convenience. But instead, I had to click a couple buttons on the interface. Waste of a good problem or not, the solution is effective, so I move on. The next stumbling block that can't be solved by adding a few automated recipes or a spot of cabling is the demand for a chemical bath to do some filler recipes involving ammonium nitrate. This is only a stumbling block in so much as it requires me to make another multi-block wash plant, since the other one is in ore washing mode and is being used by my ore refinery, so I can't double up on it. I am rich enough at this point that multi-blocks are basically just Mardi Gras beads now, and the only delay in this was getting the EBFs ready to smelt all the ingots down, so really this is no longer anything worth commenting on. Well, that's fun. Seems this game also thinks the whole item management thing is dumb, and as a consequence, it deleted my inventory. Not the stuff in it, the ability to access my inventory at all. This is why I keep creative mode enabled, by the way. It is jank like this. I have no idea what happened here, but I was looking through quests using NEI, so my guess is that some edge case with the two interacting caused it. But I have samarium now, so yay! Progress, I think. That's okay. Now that I have samarium, I can do the same thing, but this time by making circuits with different colored wingdings, without the need for making new multi-blocks to break up the tedium. Boy oh boy, do I sure love programming recipes and putting them in interfaces being a core gameplay loop. Even the most unobservant of viewers will note that this is me just repeating the same exact stupid mechanic as every other crafting bill in the game. You program recipes, slam them into the spots they need to go, and when those are done, queue them up to make batches of 1,000. After a bit of scrambling to identify any raw materials you're missing, hit the go button and then sit back and wait. Oh wait, no, that's not quite true, because I do finally make part of my EBF system ME enabled by ripping off an item conduit and replacing it with an interface. Yeah, that's some real high-level design optimization right there. Also, I need a bigger crafting computer to run the bill of 1,024 of the things that I need to make 4 stacks of Louvre tier circuits. Sure. That sounds like a super meaningful undertaking, only no, I just slam 4 more blocks on the end of one of the smaller computers and go upstairs and press a button, and wow, just like that, they all will assemble in the background while I watch the pretty numbers and the control console and listen to documentaries on YouTube. That's fun. 5 hours later, my components are done. Better get the circuits crafting. Boop! Time to tab out and go play another game for a bit, I guess. No, like, seriously, the most interesting that I did for the next couple of hours was install some battery buffers in my lines to help maintain power spikes. The crafting system does everything now. I just wait and upgrade the slow bits when I can sneak in some extra crafting bills. In good news, it does look like I'm not going to have to worry about charcoal for a bit. That's a relief. I was starting to get concerned that I might run out or something. Yeah, let's maybe turn that off. This stage of circuit crafting has already taken an approximate flipping eternity, and I need something to do. Let's start on Louvre tier machine components, since surely that won't need any circuits, right? Except that they do, because they have additional requirements for crafting now. Louvre tier stuff needs an assembly line in order to assemble it. This is basically an assembly machine, but multi-block, and has a bunch of entirely predictable quirks. Namely, that it is insanely expensive and is a pain in the butt to automate unless you have AE2, because that seems to be a prerequisite to doing anything short of picking your nose nowadays. Also, Each full assembly line requires 120 ZPM tier circuits to construct, which, by sheer unfathomable coincidence, is almost exactly the number I'm making right now. You know, the ones that have already taken like 9 hours. So, full disclosure, this part of the video is just a rant. I put footage to it because I'm nice like that, but I do have some opinions that need to make themselves known. We are around, loosely, 2/3 of the way through the video. During that 20-minute interlude, there were exactly 2 projects that involved anything even remotely close to novel engineering problems, which is, you know, the whole reason I wanted to do this challenge in the first place. The rest of my gameplay is me doing grunt work in a modern factory floor, but gamified. This content, as near as I can tell, took around 50 to 55 hours to collect footage for, not because I wasn't doing stuff, but because it took that long to find something interesting to talk about, which means that I spent more time this week doing make work in a video game than I do in actual paying important to other people real-life work. This trend of excessively overpriced, time-consuming projects persists throughout the rest of the game, and I did some theory crafting. Aside from one last upgrade to my altar for better meteors, I'm going to be doing nothing meaningful with anything except applied energistics and the Gregtech add-on soup until I hit the endgame. And even then, the other mods are mostly just door prizes, like, yeah, here you go, a sword that does infinite damage and armor that makes you immortal to help you deal with all of the, what? Exactly. While recent updates have gone a long way to working on this problem, this mod pack really struggles to respect your time. Case in point, IV circuit assembling takes 10 seconds at 2400 EU per tick. It's an IV machine! You could double or triple that energy input, keep it at the same voltage tier and the same production cost, and save everyone the bother of having to make 3 of them to do the job of 1. If you want servers to stop lagging, sure, make optimizations, but also maybe try not forcing people to choose between maintaining a healthy server TPS and maintaining a healthy social life. Thumbcraft has baked into the base mod a way of altering how simple or complicated research projects are, and 90% of the things you have to unlock to get good stuff are utterly useless. Why complain about the problem and then solve it by programming in a custom multi-block when you could have instead not required people to write a doctoral thesis before they could throw things into a bucket of hot water? This lack of respect is present throughout the pack, and at least in the early game has some plausible justifications in the form of balancing, because at that point the math simply does not work out. This excuse stops flying past EV, and somewhere in that EV to IV transition it feels like there was a switch that got flipped that changed the whole focus from the pack from creative engineering to a poorly concealed attempt at turning wasted time into a status symbol. Alright. Soapbox rant over, back to reality now. To put it bluntly, I can no longer maintain the workload necessary to produce quality content for the series at my current upload schedule. Even before, when game progression was faster and more interesting, videos took almost 30 hours to complete, optimistically. This was sustainable when I was working, but only barely. Over the past couple of months, that time requirement has been steadily creeping upwards, but was still manageable because I wasn't working. However, that is not going to be the case for much longer. My previous episodes took well over 45 hours to finish. This one, at its current trend, is looking like it might very well break 60. That time requirement, when combined with my upload schedule, results in demands that would be both individually unhealthy and functionally impossible to meet. And something, be it upload regularity, video length, or video quality, would have had to give. So, nothing is going on a bit of a hiatus, so that I can take an actual break from New Horizons for once, and after that hiatus, nothing will be resuming with a reduced upload schedule. In the meantime, I will be continuing on with other less demanding series and branching out from what has been until this point an entirely Minecraft-focused channel. Maybe. I do like Minecraft, after all. We'll see. I know that this is a bit disappointing to hear for some of you, and I am legitimately sorry that it has to come so abruptly, but we're at the point where something has to change, and I need a chance to not play New Horizons for a bit, and I didn't want to kill the series entirely or sacrifice video quality to get that. So, thank you for your time. If you're interested in getting a bit of a head start on the next series, the first episode is already available to channel members, otherwise that will be coming out for you during the regularly scheduled Nothing Time next Friday. As always, I hope you enjoyed.